It's fall, which means it's that time of the year where we'll begin to see all of our favorite sports games released. Your Maddens, your NHLs, and most importantly, your FIFAs. EA has historically been the top dog when it comes to franchise sports video games, with titles in football, hockey, basketball, the other football, golf, boxing, mixed martial arts, and many more. These sports games are the bread and butter of one of the biggest publishers in the video games industry. And the reason why is because these games are played by a massive amount of people. Chances are, if you're watching this video, as hardcore or casual of a gamer that you may be, you've probably picked up a sports game either for yourself or as an easy holiday gift. Nowadays, we see sim sports as a money machine. FIFA is an incredible moneymaker for EA, with minor improvements between games, and Ultimate Team being what the company is now known for. However, once upon a time, EA was doing things a tad bit differently. In conjunction with the traditional Madden and NBA Live releases, EA had a sub-label called EA Sports Big that took traditional sports titles and turned them into something different, fun, and memorable. So much so that till this day, people like me still ask, where is EA Sports Big? Welcome to The Blessing Show, where I break down what's up. So let's talk about what's up with
EA Sports.
Growing up, there was nothing like an arcade sports game. The first video game I ever owned as a kid was Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey for the N64, and when I wasn't starting fights in the middle of the rink, I was charging headfirst into opposition to steal a puck and rack up the score. Many of us had our own entries into arcade sports. So many NBA Jam catchphrases still stand as iconic, and I'll never forget the countless times I played my PlayStation Underground demo of NFL Blitz back in the day. Come the PS2 era, and arcade sports games had taken the next step from being simplified, fun versions of traditional sports with less fouls and bigger heads on the players, to becoming something a little bit more varied and imbued with personality. EA Sports Big was a leading effort, taking advantage of EA's sports licenses and doing something really cool with them. This started with SSX, a snowboarding game that launched with the PS2 as one of the standouts in the console's early lineup, with a staggering 93 on Metacritic. This was an impressive step up from EA's output at the time, which included games like Kessen and WCW Backstage Assault. SSX was the proof in the pudding that EA could go bigger. Soon after SSX followed NBA Street, SSX Tricky, Freakstyle, NBA Street Volume 2, FIFA Street, Jam Vendetta, and the list goes on. EA was on fire with EA Sports Big games, so much so that just in 2004, they released not only NFL Street, but NFL Street 2. That's right, they released 2 NFL Streets in just 1 year. To understand why EA Sports Big games are so special, it's important to dive into the actual titles themselves. So let's start with my favorite, NBA Street Volume 2. NBA Street was an obsession for me and many others, being one of the most memorable sports games on the PlayStation 2. It was a 3-on-3 basketball game where the more stylish you play, the bigger the advantage you have on the court. This includes crazy dunks, style moves, and off the heezies. Essentially, it's that fake game that LeBron's fake son made in Space Jam 2, but featuring Nelly and the St. Lunatics.
Is this not real basketball?
It was an easy game to pick up, being a simplified version of regular basketball, yet every added element was a fun twist on gameplay. If you're being guarded by an opponent, you could stagger them with a trick move. If you saw a teammate leap 10 feet into the air, that's a signal that you can go for an alley-oop. Every stylish action you'd make would build your game breaker meter, and if you could fill it to its max, it would be your chance at easy points. It's a basketball game at its core without the constraints of an NBA game, plus all of the fun of street ball. But that's far from where the game stops shining. From the dope-ass opening cinematic to the menu music being Lords of the Underground to DJ Cucumber Slice aka Bobito Garcia commentating the games, NBA Street embraced hip-hop culture authentically and through every strand of its DNA, so much so that a young Black Blessing was enamored with it because I'd never felt so represented in a video game like this before. NBA Street Volume 2 got it right on so many levels, and the same can be said about the other EA Sports Big titles. NFL Street similarly took the complexities of the Madden games and distilled them down into something easier to understand. It had the bombastic arcade spirit of NFL Blitz, but added in even more unique touches like wall running, behind the back passes, and tackles that would send fools halfway down the field. EA Sports Big was focused on delivering games with dope music, outrageous style, easy to pick up gameplay, and most importantly, big personality. That personality shines through titles like Jam Vendetta, a professional wrestling game where you could play as famous podcaster and staple gun advocate Joe Budden.
Where did he find a staple gun?
Along with hip-hop legends like DMX and others. That personality also prevails through the beloved SSX snowboarding games, which take the tricks and score system of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and combine them with memorable, original characters and intense downhill races. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is crucial to bring up when talking about EA Sports Big. Although it's an Activision franchise, Its DNA influenced nearly every title in EA Sports Big's catalog, whether it's the arcade gameplay, score system, or its handling of extreme sports culture. For a whole console generation, these games brought a fun edge and lighthearted flair to its libraries, but toward the beginning of the PS3 and Xbox 360 generation, EA Sports Big disappeared and we stopped seeing alternative sports games with the same amounts of style, attitude, and deep level of arcade fun. From here on, if you're not Electronic Arts, you don't have to watch the rest of the video. I'll give everyone except for EA a second to click off. I'll wait. Listen, EA, right now is the perfect time to bring back EA Sports Big. If you need an expert in street ball, I'll happily offer my services for exactly $10 more than what I'm making here at Kinda Funny. In all seriousness, and I am nothing but serious, there are quite a few reasons why EA Sports Big disappeared. Around the time, EA as a company was going through big shifts. They had gotten a new CEO, there was a financial crisis that led to 11% of its workforce being let go, and the company was becoming risk-averse and more conservative with greenlighting experimental projects. The industry as a whole was seeing the AA sphere fall away with big publishers like THQ shutting down. EA Sports Big, although producing great games, wasn't producing moneymakers on the level of FIFA and Madden. And frankly, that all makes sense, and I understand EA Sports Big going away for these reasons, but that was 2008. 2021 is a different era for video games. AA games have slowly made a comeback over the last generation. THQ has risen from their ashes, releasing games like Biomutant, SpongeBob, and others that harken back to their AA roots. Other games like Hellblade and A Plague Tale: Innocence have been shining examples of what you can do nowadays with a smaller budget and a moderate scope. In fact, plenty of games over the last decade have played around with exploring the space between AAA and indie. Rocket League is a perfect example. Rocket League is basically an EA Sports Big game. It's an arcade-style experience with a fun twist on soccer, a banging soundtrack, and easy-to-pick-up gameplay that's hard to master. It has everything you'd want out of a modern EA Sports Big game, and it's super successful, adding tons of content, a battle pass system, and more since its launch. More and more games are starting to take up the mantle of EA Sports Big. I've talked to folks like my friend and colleague Snowbike Mike about both of our excitement for games like Riders Republic and Shredders, which look to bring back the fun and craziness that we loved from games like SSX. In fact, off air, I told Mike about how this episode of The Blessing Show is going to be all about EA Sports Big, and I'd say his reaction speaks for all of us.
This Blessing Show episode should be all about attacking EA and how it's inexcusable that they have never remastered or retried the easiest idea on planet Earth. Oh, let's bring back Dead Space. Who in the wants Dead Space? Why are we not in the boardroom going like, why are we not bringing back NBA Street? Where is NFL Street? Oh no, let's bring back Dead Space. Dead Space. We want NFL Street and NBA Street. Pull your lives together. Holy who's running that company?
I know Mike might seem overly excited, but that is him on a calm day. While other studios are filling in the gap that Big left behind, quietly in the background, EA has been laying the groundwork for what might actually be a big comeback. FIFA in recent years has added in a new mode called Volta, which is its own take on FIFA Street, allowing players to play with smaller teams in local spots. Volta puts emphasis on dribbling and style with quicker gameplay and shorter matches. The mode also has its own separate soundtrack from the rest of the game, a story campaign, systems allowing you to draft players by defeating other squads, and deeper customization on your squad's appearance. Volta is a fairly decent answer to the gap left behind by EA Sports Big, but it's also a signal that EA understands that there is a desire for this type of content. And as much as I enjoy Volta, at its heart, it's still a sim FIFA game, just with the pieces rearranged. It lacks the arcade fun and flow of something new and original. FIFA Street wasn't just about putting soccer in the street. It was about the Tony Hawk style trick points, the crazy sound effects, the big animations, and the pick up and play nature. Even though bringing back this vertical of games for EA may sound like a large ask, I would argue that it's good for the business and good for the brand. Modern EA is often associated with boring money moves and at times even predatory microtransactions. We've seen them try to escape this stigma. They've announced Skate 4 and Dead Space, Respawn put out Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and is keeping Apex Legends excellent, and EA also has EA Originals, which is their sub-label for publishing smaller, more unique titles. EA Originals is key to my argument. Remember what I talked about earlier with the AA space making a comeback? EA Originals is a huge part of that. Since the label began, they've published games like Unravel, A Way Out, and It Takes Two. Games that don't have the wide reach of EA's big moneymakers, but that's not the point. EA Originals exists as a way to allow personality into the EA brand. For a company that's been struggling over the years with its identity, it gives the audience something to hold on to. I mean, Joseph Fares alone has brought in the most personality this company has seen in the last decade.
the Oscars, you know?
And the crazy thing is, these games can be successful. It Takes Two came out under EA Originals last spring, and it's one of the best reviewed games this year with over 2 million copies sold as of June. The latest game to come out under the EA Originals label is one of my favorite games of the year, Knockout City. It's a twist on dodgeball where players run around the map and try to score knockouts on the opposing team. It has a colorful cartoon-like art style with a dope hip-hop and funk soundtrack. It's also super easy to pick up and play with friends, but contains loads of depth if you want to get lost in its arcade-style gameplay. If any of that sounds familiar, that's because Knockout City is basically an EA Sports big game. In the same way that Rocket League felt like a modern take on everything that worked about those games in the past, Knockout City as well sports a smart progression system, fun character customization featuring dope unlockable clothing options, seasonal updates, and everything you'd want out of an EA Sports big game in 2021 just without the label. Hell, it even has the street attitude in its visual design. Knockout City reached 5 million players after its launch, partly thanks to it launching on Game Pass and it being available for free until you hit level 25. And in spite of those caveats, those are excellent numbers when you consider it being a live multiplayer game that's going to thrive and make money based on having a large player base. Now take the style, setup, and scope of Knockout City and apply that to any of EA Sports franchises. In a world where NBA Live is struggling, you might as well. For real though, bring back EA Sports Big. Business theories and marketing strategies aside, EA Sports Big means a lot to people, and for good reason. Talk to anyone who owned a PS2 about their memories with Def Jam fighting games or the influence of SSX, and they'll tell you about how much they miss it. In the same way that EA Originals has started to liven up the EA catalog, bringing back EA Sports Big would be a slam dunk, and not just a regular slam dunk. I'm talking a Super Mario slam dunk from the GameCube version of NBA Street Volume 3. To close out this blessing show, I mentioned earlier that if EA wanted someone with an expertise in streetball, that I would happily offer my services. Well, I've gone ahead and put together an audition tape for EA Sports Big. Roger, roll the tape.
Quit asking me questions. Yeah, I know you, but we ain't friends. Quit asking me questions. Yeah, we in this section, but you can't get in. Quit asking me questions. Yeah, I got the new Chrysler, blue at the tent. Quit asking me questions. I'm tired of these questions. Asking me questions, I want my questions. They all in my business like TMZ, but back in the day they ain't noticed me. They weren't coming to see me like Otis, but I always felt like the coldest. I had a little chip on my shoulder, then I got older and older, and I had to flick it off. I feel like a boss, like I'm Ricky Ross.